because this has been ratcheting up, and I obviously helped to contribute ratcheting up. I want to make clear that in my choice of words, I think I unfortunately gave an impression that I was maligning the Cambridge Police Department or Sergeant Crowley specifically. And I could have calibrated those words differently. And I told this to Sergeant Crowley.
The president said the police there acted stupidly.
The president basically regretted the fact of how worked up this comment got the media.
Was his heart broken by it?
The example of the unfinished business of America.
Story about black and white that was never black and white.
There have to be larger conversations about this.
He is not backing down.
I wasn't angry, wasn't frustrated. I was sad.
It is not racial profiling.
He's the, if you will, the Rosa Parks of racial profiling.
Race.
This is incendiary.
Darling, you send me. I know you.
I am so tired of this 60s con job. I don't know about you. You want to have a larger conversation about race? Go ahead. Give me a call here. 1-800-449-8255. We have a black president, at least 50% black. The last I checked, he was 50% black, but they call him a black president. All right, we'll go with that. And it's still not enough. We still need a conversation about race. So let's have a conversation about race. Why don't you call the show and tell me what you've paid as a result of racial politics in America? Why don't you call this show and tell all of America how affirmative action has sidetracked you because you are not a minority? Why don't you call this show and talk about the extortionist taxes that you've had to pay to support people who won't work, or people who came here illegally, or prison populations that are 1/3 illegal alien? You want to have a bigger conversation about race? Go ahead. That's what the liberals want. That's what the liberals are going to get. Let's have that bigger conversation about race right now. I am sick of this. This professor is a 10th-rate con man as far as I'm concerned. And let me tell you something. I have a real PhD, a real earned PhD. Does that make me a great scholar? No. Does it make me greater than Einstein? No. But I'll tell you right now, I know scholarship from fraud. The guy is a faker from the top to the bottom. This guy got everywhere using race and using race baiting as far as I'm concerned. And by what I can tell, by reading the police report and by what I heard, the guy caused the whole thing himself. Now, let's look at old Mr. Gates. Excuse me, Professor Gates. You're not going to believe this. Gates has been an outspoken critic of the so-called Eurocentric literary canon. That means Shakespeare. That means Moliere. That means anybody who is not, any white writer, any European writer. That's called the Eurocentric literary canon. Instead, Gates insists that black literature must be evaluated by the aesthetic criteria of its culture of origin. What does that mean? How do you evaluate literature by the aesthetic criteria of its culture of origin? That's double talk. And the reason I say it's double talk is because Gates is a prostitute, in my opinion. He was a witness in a trial in Los Angeles, I believe, on behalf of the controversial Florida rap group 2 Live Crew in their obscenity case. Gates, the distinguished Harvard professor, had the nerve to argue that the pornographic material that this group used, the curse words, the vile words, the words that we all know to be profane, Dr. Gates, insisted that this profanity had important roots in African-American vernacular, in African-American games, and literary traditions, and should therefore be protected. So in other words, the next time you hear MF, or the next time you hear MF, FF, FF, MEF, FFFF, MFFF, you're not hearing profanity. What you're hearing, according to Professor Gates, is not profanity at all. The MF that you're hearing is actually, it's a cultural tradition from Africa. And it's part of the black cultural voice. And if you don't accept the word MF in every other sentence out of a song, you are an intellectual racist, according to Professor Gates. So don't tell me who Gates is. I've met the Gateses in my life. If you want to know who Gates really is, listen to Reverend Wright, and you'll know who Gates really is. If you want to know what actually goes on between Obama's ears when he's not play acting at being a president, Listen to Reverend Wright's sermons, and you'll know why when there's no teleprompter, the real Barack Obama comes out. So make no mistake about it. We are skating on very thin ice with this man in the White House, and you've only seen the beginning of it. 1-800-449-8255, michaelsavage.com. Any topic is fair game, but I know this is what I want to talk about. The president knows that he made a mistake. He showed his prejudices by speaking out and calling the cops stupid. He didn't know the full extent of the conversation. And after all, we're all waiting to hear the 9/11 call because you can hear, according to what I've read, they're so condemning of Gates. Professor Howard Gates, whatever his name. They're so condemning of him. He was so out of control that the newspapers buried the 9/11 call. Nobody will release them because once you hear them, no one listening to the show, black, white, or whatever, can argue that it wasn't Gates who provoked the whole thing. Okay? Ralph in New York, WOR, go ahead, please.
Dr. Savage, let me say this, why I believe the racial factor is involved in this whole thing, sir. It has something to do with the fact that I hear white people on TV talk about this has never happened to a white person or this will never happen to a white person. That's why I believe the racial factor is involved in this.
Wait, I don't understand. You think that a white has never been arrested for mouthing off to a cop?
Racial profiling, as we define it in this country, or as it applies.
Ralph, you just said whites could never be arrested this way. Isn't that what you just said, Ralph?
No. Well,
have you never watched the show Cops, where white cops arrest rowdy white people who are drunk or beating up their wife or mouthing off to the cop? Haven't you seen cops have to arrest them?
I did show that the show that you mentioned, but not in.
Well, usually it's white cops arresting white trash, but it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with an idiot who's acting up. In this case, Gates was an idiot acting up. I mean, what would you do if you're a cop and you start having a guy call your name, screaming at you, yelling, and says, "I'll tell you, mama," or whatever? You think that's appropriate for a professor?
I do not think it is. But, there is an overreaction on the part of the police here as well.
Well, then I guess the police should never show up to a black call, right? The next time a black calls 9/11, the cop should say, "Are you black or white?" Because if you're black, we're not going. Because whatever we do, you're going to sue us. Would that be the appropriate response?
Would not be that.
Now, what would have happened if the woman had called that there's a break-in, and there was a break-in, and the police said, "We're not going there because Gates is black, and he doesn't like white cops who are afraid of being arrested or falsely charged of racism"? What would have happened then? I guess Gates would have had another lawsuit. So whichever way they would have gone, Gates could have gotten up on TV and screamed racism in a crowded nation. If cops didn't show up, then they're racist. They do show up, then they're racist. Don't you see this guy's used this racket his whole life? How did he go from being not handicapped to handicapped? Did you see that one? When he was shooting his yap off and screaming and yelling, he didn't need a cane, did he? But the minute they put cuffs on him, he became disabled, and he needed help, and he needed a cane. How'd that happen? How did he become disabled all of a sudden? Take a walk. I'll be right back.